Test, no. No.
This is.
No, she's excused. Technical difficulties.
No.
Okay.
Hello? I will call IT, whoever's on call.
Okay. So, we start or wait? My voice carries.
I
I
would
don't know that
say,
we can be on the television.
I would say start.
Okay.
And I'll,
All right. Yeah, we're going to take one more shot at this audio situation. If the microphones are down, we're going to start anyway because our voices carry. We may have trouble with the live stream broadcast, but we will have an audio recording that the clerk is going to take for us as well. Okay, so while they're working on rebooting that audio, with the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Public Health and Safety Committee for Monday, June 17th, 2024 to order. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of our previous meeting from 5/20 of '24, copies of which have been placed in the meeting packets. Did anyone note any changes or updates they need for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I also make the motion.
Motion from Larson, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 2 is to consider approval or denial of various license applications. We have one recommended for denial this evening, which is a public transport license for Jeremy Connors. Under our ordinance, denied applicants are allowed to come and address the committee and are also allowed to present evidence of rehabilitation that could be considered by the police department in making their or upholding their recommendation. Do we have Jeremy Connors with us this evening? Jeremy Connors? Okay, you can come on up to the podium. We don't have the microphone at this point, so I'll ask you to speak up. Is there anything on your record, Jeremy, that is factually inaccurate? Is your record accurate as shown?
My record has a lot of things that have been read in, dismissed but read in.
Okay,
The things that are on CCAP should be one open case, operating a motor vehicle without owner's consent, which is, my attorney says being thrown out. That's a different county. And then really nothing is, I have 2 misdemeanors that I just got charged for, and I didn't get charged for anything else.
okay. The number one concern that we have almost always as a committee is the recent nature of violations, if there's cases pending or recent events that are related to the activity that you're looking to engage in. Obviously, the cure for some of this stuff when the record is lengthy is time to let some of that stuff just really age off and show an extended period of time during which nothing like that has taken place. So as a committee member, that's one thing I always take into account is things that are recent and then a pattern of things Obviously, as a public transport driver, when we put you in a vehicle with someone, we expect a heightened level of responsibility and decision-making associated with the possession of that license. And so, I guess, Chief, did you want to weigh in on the review of this particular license?
Sure, there is a long history of criminal charges dating back approximately 30 years. I would agree that there are numerous dismissed but read-in charges, but I only base my decisions on those things that have a finding of guilty or no contest. And in that case, there is a battery conviction that is one of those charges that we don't have to consider evidence of rehabilitation. It's an exempt offense. There are several convictions that it's stated in CCAP guilty / not guilty due to mental disease or defect, as well as several continued misdemeanors, which in and of themselves recently would not be a reason to recommend denial. However, that continued pattern of charges and the current open charge that hasn't been dismissed yet of taking and driving a motorist vehicle without their consent, which is vehicle theft or is synonymous with that charge in Wisconsin. So given the totality of that criminal record, as well as the guilty, not guilty, due to mental disease or defect, multiple cases were concluded with that finding. Having an individual operating a vehicle with a license from the city to stop at people's homes and pick them up and be responsible for taking them places is not something that I can recommend this committee do.
Okay. That was a concern I had also, as well as the totality of the record, and then, things that are not yet settled. And often what happens is if a license is denied or, and there are cases pending, if those resolve themselves favorably, obviously, people can reapply. If there's something that changes that path. The other thing, like I said, the cure for some of this stuff is time. If we can show an extended period where violations are, very, very old and nothing has occurred in the recent history, that sometimes is just viewed differently than things that continue to present themselves on the record and things that are still not yet adjudicated. So, absent request from within the committee to consider the license separately, we would consider that still with the batch. With that, I would consider a motion to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff, if there's not movement to handle the license separately. And if we make that motion, okay.
I'll
Go
make
ahead.
that recommendation. I'll
Okay,
make that
so we have a motion from Larson, and do we have a second? Second by Lukens, and that motion is to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff.
Correct.
Along with that, also is the events that were listed in the packet. Most of them are recurring events. And on that one also is a new establishment, Wishi Japanese Ramen, that is looking to open at the site formerly occupied by Thrive. The Liquor License Review Subcommittee reviewed that license immediately prior to this meeting and voted unanimously to approve that license or recommend approval. So that was the only thing that was unresolved in our list. The subcommittee did support that license as well. So with a motion to accept or deny as recommended by staff on the table, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So next on our agenda is a presentation and discussion regarding operators licensing requirements. And since every year or every couple of years, when we undertake this effort, we have some criteria that we use to consider licensing. And I've asked Tegan from the City Attorney's Office to just run us through a quick PowerPoint to give us a little more background and knowledge about what weighs into our decision-making for acceptance and denial for operator licensing requirements. So we'll turn it over to her. The PowerPoint is working, but the audio is not, so.
It might be.
Is it?
Can you hear me? No.
No, still not. I was so optimistic too, so feel free to yell.
Okay. So it looks like there's not a PowerPoint for the people to see, but everybody up front can see it.
Well, we're doing good.
We are,
0 for 2 tonight, huh?
we're 0 for 2 on AV today.
I mean, I have my own PowerPoint, but I don't know that people can see it.
Yep.
So,
Let's see if we can get it up on the screen here.
okay.
There, it's up there.
Okay, now it's on the small screen. There it comes. We just need to dim the light back behind. There we go.
Very fancy.
All right.
All right, so just let me know if you can't hear me. I'll try and project. All right, so as Alder Rasmussen stated, my name's Tegan Troutner. I'm an assistant city attorney for the city of Wausau. I was asked to do a presentation on licensing requirements since we have some new members on the panel or on the committee. And so if we could go to the next slide. So the one question that you probably are asking is, why does it matter if you know what the rules are about licensing or not, and why are we talking about it? So the reason we're talking about it is because public health and safety is responsible for reviewing the denials and approvals of operators' licenses. I mean, you guys just did one for a driver license. Sorry, not taxi cab license. And so this is kind of a continuation on that, but I'm kind of mainly had my presentation pointed towards the alcohol licenses. So like I said, you guys review these before to see whether or not you're going to approve what the recommendation was from staff. Next slide, please. So how this process works is the clerk's office will receive an application for a license, and the clerk's office goes through the bottom 4 points on this list. So they check to make sure that this individual or the applicant was a resident of Wisconsin for at least 90 days, continuous prior to the application date, whether or not they've attained the legal drinking age, if they've completed a responsible beverage server training course within 2 years of the date of the application, and then whether or not they've submitted proof under 7761 subsection 11. I didn't go into it because that's not something that we normally go into here. And the top part is mainly what we are going to be discussing today, and that's whether or not the individual has an arrest or conviction record. So there are some different rules that apply. You have to look to whether or not the conviction or the pending charge, I'm still on the other side, whether or not that's substantially related. And then you also have to look to whether or not somebody is a habitual law offender. So those factors can come into play when you're deciding whether or not to approve or deny, or to whether or not to approve the denial recommendation from staff. Next slide. So this slide, so you have separate rules for whether or not you have an arrest record or pending criminal charges. So under Wisconsin statutes 111.335, that's kind of the statute that talks about, it's our Wisconsin Fair Employment Act. And as the slide says, basically discrimination for a licensing agency, it is discrimination for a licensing agency to refuse to license any individual solely because they're subject to pending criminal charges or they have an arrest record. However, there is an exception, and that is unless the circumstances of the charge substantially relate to the circumstances of the particular license activity. So like we discussed earlier, where there was a battery offense where you're involving people as well as a vehicle theft, those can substantially relate to the offense and to the license activity. And then after that, you have to see whether or not the charge is an exempt offense, and we'll talk about that later. But there are different rules for exempt offenses, and those also involve crimes against people, so physical violence and things like that. And then there are also different rules that apply if it's a violent crime against a child. So next slide. Can I do the next slide, please? Thank you. And so you also have to look to whether or not there are convictions. So in the record that we just kind of discussed, there were convictions and pending charges. And here, if it's a conviction, it is discrimination to deny a license for a conviction of a felony, misdemeanor, or other offense unless the circumstances of that conviction substantially relate to the circumstances of the license activity. Now, the hang-up that a lot of people have a hard time understanding and wrapping their brain around is, what does it mean to substantially relate? So next slide. So unfortunately, there is not really a clear definition in the statutes. They don't actually define substantially relate for anybody, so you have to look to case law. So we look to case law to see what that says. And the burden is on the city to show that the circumstances of the offense substantially relate to the circumstances of the license activity. However, there is no requirement that the offense has to be identical to the license activity. So there are certain characteristics of different offenses that could apply in a case, and you can be like, hey, this fact materially relates to this offense and the license activity. So and if so, then you can deny the license because it substantially relates. So basically, this is the standards. You look to whether or not the facts, events, and conditions surrounding the offense, they have to materially relate to the facts, events, and conditions of the surrounding license activities. And when we say materially relate, they're talking about whether or not there is an opportunity to commit the criminal offense that is in question in the license activity, such that the circumstances of the workplace and the position would give the individual an opportunity to repeat that same criminal behavior. So where we're talking about managing an establishment that sells alcoholic beverages or bartending at an establishment that sells alcoholic beverages, there are certain offenses that we can automatically say materially relate. But just because there are certain offenses doesn't mean that that list is exhaustive. So if we could do the next slide, please. So when I was looking at this, I kind of wanted to go through and say, okay, what are the traits of a bartender and a manager, and what are the duties of that position? Because a lot of the case law kind of, when they go through their analysis, they look to those factors as to whether or not this offense substantially relates. They look to what the person is doing, what their duties are, and characteristics that you're looking for in that position. So, like I said, this list isn't exhaustive, but these are some examples that I thought of. So when you have somebody who's bartending or managing, you want them to be responsible because they're dealing with a lot of drunk people. You want them to exercise good judgment, whether or not they're going to serve an underage individual, whether or not they're going to serve somebody who's already had too much. You want them to be level-headed. Oftentimes, alcohol sometimes doesn't really bring out the best in people. And so you can have some angry customers. There are often bar fights, as I'm sure we're all aware of on this committee. And then you also want them to be patient when they're dealing with individuals who are under the influence. And so you also want them to be, if there's some sort of conduct, you want them to be responsible enough that they're going to alert the police to this so that the police can handle it. And then you also want them to observe their closing hours, all those good things. So offenses that kind of tend to show the opposite of those traits, so ones that when our office looked at this, as I'm sure you're aware, there was a packet there was some materials provided in the packet with policy. So our office has looked through this a lot. And some of the offenses that we looked to, so OWI, so that's operating while intoxicated. The next one, that's probably my Utah slang coming in. POX, possession of a controlled substance. So someone who's possessing a controlled substance. That's what we call it here too, right? No?
Same concept.
Same concept. All right. The Utah's coming through. And then there are also some violent offenses, and you'll have to excuse my typos on some of those. So things like resisting arrest, battery, homicide, substantial battery, aggravated battery, distributing drugs, drug trafficking, someone who makes drugs, things like that. Those could substantially relate. And again, this list is not exhaustive. It's just kind of, I was looking through, hey, these things just on a simple analysis that they could relate. So if we could go to the next slide. So when Chief Barnes is making his determination as to whether or not something substantially relates, this is kind of the process that he follows. Things that he considers, or things that should be considered, are somebody's criminal history. So you look at the length of the length of the history, so whether or not you have just one offense or if you have a whole bunch of offenses spanning a lengthy period of time. You can also look to the time frame, so whether or not that offense was just this last month or if it was 30 years ago. You also look to the seriousness, so a felony versus a misdemeanor. And then you also look at the number of offenses. So is this just one offense, or is this a whole bunch that shows a pattern of behavior? So, like, for example, if you have someone who's committed assault and then they do it 1 year and then they keep coming back with assaults or some sort of assaultive behavior, they're not showing any change to that behavior. And so with that this accumulation of history, when you have a lengthy history, that can be evidence that the person is not rehabilitated. And so that also goes to this analysis. Well, if they're not rehabilitated, then we can say that this offense substantially relates. And there is no duty, so reading through the case law, there is no duty or requirement to reintegrate a person into the workforce if they have demonstrated a likelihood of repetitive criminal behavior as it relates to the licensed activity. So, next slide, please. So we often talk about exempt offenses, and just because someone is convicted of an exempt offense does not automatically preclude them from getting a license. So you still have to show that that this offense substantially relates to the licensed activity. But what it means to be exempt is that they are not required, or the city is not required, to review evidence of rehabilitation. So these are just some of the offenses. I don't need to read them out for you, but a lot of these involve children and abuse of children. Next slide, please. And they also include offenses from Chapter 940. So those are crimes that Wisconsin defines as that are against life and bodily security. So when somebody's assaulting you, so that includes hitting, things like that, battery, homicide, strangulation and suffocation. If you stalk somebody, or if you intimidate people, those are all offenses under Chapter 940, and they're exempt, which means that while we still have to show that those offenses substantially relate to the licensed activity, we're not required to review evidence of rehabilitation. So when Chief Barnes is up here and says, hey, this is an exempt offense, what he's saying there is, because it's an exempt offense, he doesn't have to go through the analysis to rehabilitate somebody. It's not required under Wisconsin statutes. Next slide. So I think I probably already covered this, but just to recap, so if an offense is not an exempt offense, then when the city denies a license, they'll state in writing the basis for that denial, and that also should include a statement of how the circumstances of the offense relate to the licensed activity. And then again, if it's not if it's not an exempt offense, then the applicant can be allowed to show evidence of rehabilitation and fitness, and that is a separate section that I'll talk about in the next slide. However, if it's an exempt offense, the city is not required to provide a written statement for the basis of the denial, and they are also not required to permit the individual an opportunity to show evidence of rehabilitation and fitness. Next slide. So this is just straight from the statute of what is evidence of rehabilitation and fitness. So when the city comes back and says, hey, we want to see or somebody comes up and says, hey, it's not an exempt offense and I want to show that I've been rehabilitated, these are documents that they can provide and that the city can review. And one thing that I would like to highlight, because I know that this was talked about earlier, is that 1 year since the release and no new convictions. So we are looking to make sure that there aren't any new offenses, and that goes into the analysis. But I will let you guys read that for yourselves. Next slide. So what happens if you guys determine, hey, there is, or if the police determine that there is evidence of rehabilitation and fitness? Well, it can't just be evidence. It has to be competent evidence of that, and that it has to be a sufficient rehabilitation. And if that is shown, then they must be given the license as long as they meet the other licensing requirements. However, when we're talking about evidence of rehabilitation and fitness, it's important to note that the burden is not on the city to request that information. The burden is on the applicant to provide evidence to the city clerk. And if no evidence is provided, then there is a presumption that no evidence exists. So it is not the city's burden to be like, hey, I see you've got a history and we're going to deny it. Can we get some evidence of rehabilitation and fitness? That's not the city's job. And we are not required to do that. So the burden is on the applicant to provide that evidence. So that's the end of that presentation. If there are any questions, feel free to ask.
Well, and I think, thank you for that, Tegan. I think it's important too to recognize that as a committee, one thing that we try to always do is be consistent. I think it's important in our decision-making that similarly situated individuals that are operating under similar circumstances be treated similarly by this committee. I mean, as a measure of fairness, we do have the due process to let them come and address the committee, to consider information that we may not have had at the time of the denial, if they have become aware of the rehabilitation evidence possibility, if they've brought evidence in. And I'm glad that you emphasized what qualified evidence is, because so often it's not always quantifiable evidence. It's a letter from a friend that says this applicant is a great person, or I worked with this person for 6 months and I've never seen them be bad. And that isn't enough sometimes for us to feel comfortable in allowing that level of responsibility if that stuff is recent. So we try to be consistent in the decisions we make so that people that are similarly situated get similar results. But also we've been very willing to consider evidence of rehab, and on a couple of occasions that evidence has actually, following the chief's review, led to a recommendation to give an individual a chance. Sometimes it does not. And so, there can be different outcomes, but I think it's important that we consider that evidence when it's presented to us. So does anyone have questions for Tegan or for the chief who does this work all the time about this particular process?
No.
If not, we'll place the presentation on file. In between, if anyone has questions or wants to know more or something comes to mind, you can always reach out to Tegan or to the chief and ask those questions individually, and I'm sure they're happy to give you some background. With that, our next item is the Wausau Fire Department update. You have the copies of the report in the packets. Anything notable on the report, Deputy Chief Luce, that you would like to highlight on the report?
For this month, we don't have a quarterly report submitted for next month.
Okay.
But I just have a
Few items to go over? Go ahead, sure. We will give you the floor.
As far as a few updates go, I'm happy to report that we recently graduated 3 new firefighters from our recruit academy, adding to the much needed personnel to our crews. We remain 3 firefighters below our ideal staffing, but we're encouraged by the progress. We anticipate another recruit class coming up, as we have 2 promising candidates that are undergoing testing and assessments currently, with a potential hire date in July. We have a promotional process for the position of lieutenant that's underway. On June 26th, we'll be hosting an assessment center featuring 4 tactical exercises and an oral interview. Ladder 2 remains under investigation, an incident where a firefighter was hurt when the aerial device malfunctioned. On June 24th, representatives from CIVMIC, the apparatus manufacturer, the hydraulic manufacturer, and legal counsel for the injured firefighter will be present for a comprehensive investigation of that apparatus. In May, we conducted a highly successful 3-day live fire training. This training provided invaluable experience for our firefighters, allowing them practical real-world fire conditions in a controlled environment. It also fostered a good collaboration between our investigative partners from the Department of Criminal Investigation, DCI, and State Fire Marshal's Office. And the crews even got the opportunity to observe DCI's arson dogs and cadaver dogs in action. And as far as the community care paramedic, we're excited to announce that the funding for the community care paramedic position has been generously approved by the Community Foundation and the Spires Foundation, and we're just finalizing some details before that position can be formally posted. That's my update.
Any questions about the update for the chief? If not, we'll place that report on file. That brings us to item number 5 on the agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding a letter of concern for compliance issues at the Domino Bar. In our past couple of meetings, we've talked about the fact that it's been observed that the Domino Bar has not been consistently open and using its Class B license. At our last meeting, we directed the clerk's office to issue a formal letter of concern and invite the license holder to address the committee on what their plan is to get open and stay open to use that license within compliance. It looks like the license holder is Brogan Milbrandt. Is Brogan here? Okay, if you'd like to come up to the podium and outline for us what your plan of operation is to utilize that license.
So the plan of operation moving forward is we actually have it listed on the market. We had a showing today.
Can you speak up, please?
The plan of operation is we listed it on the market to be sold. And the plan is to hopefully, if you guys would let us, keep the liquor license in place, at least if we could do 90 days to have that set. And then if we don't have any action in 90 days, then we would take steps moving forward to, I guess, reopen fully.
The trouble we have is that liquor licenses obviously are limited in availability. There are other businesses that desire them. And in the past, when we have given an extension for non-operation, it's been for reasons other than the place is for sale. We've had owners and license holders that have been ill, that have been unable to operate, but at some point, where the rubber meets the road is the place needs to be open and the license needs to be used. And so the license is a privilege, but it's not a property right. It can't be sold with the establishment anyway.
Sure.
So obviously it would be surrendered and whoever buys the place would have to reapply just like you did when you took over the place and go through the same process with the license review subcommittee who would make a determination as to whether or not that license would even be awarded to the applicant. There's always an option, or there's always a possibility that answer may be no.
Sure.
You know, obviously we get that authority. I think it's difficult though to know that a place is holding a license and intends to never be open at all, and for us to grant an extended period of time. 90 days is a long time. That's the rest of the summer and beyond. You know, and I don't know that that's fair to the license holders who get open, stay open, and operate using the privilege that they've been given on a daily basis. It's a difficult lift for me to sit here and preach about using a license and then give someone 90 days to not do it. So I guess I don't.
Is there any other businesses in the area that have a liquor license that are not using it currently? Like coffee shops and things like that? That have been extended longer than 90 days?
Not that I'm aware of. We've had some that have had extensions for illness. We've had some that have had extensions for construction delays. You know, when they were trying to get open or trying to remodel. But, you know, when the place is functional and ready to use and just isn't used, In that case, I think at least on one of those occasions, we took the license back. So, I guess what I was hoping to see from you as the license holder is a plan to be open to the public and hold hours on the establishment and allow that commerce to take place. And
Which is very possible. That's something, if that's what needs to be done, it can be done. Like I said, at this point, our plan was to sell the business. If that is not an option for the 90 days, I understand, I appreciate your guys' time, but then I guess the plan would be moving forward would be to open then. At
Yeah.
least assigned days of the week, if
I
that's
feel
what
like
you
it
prefer.
needs to be open. I mean, it's licensed for an active business. And, part of the reason we have what's called the abandonment ordinance is to make sure that the licenses we award get used for the purpose for which they're intended. Ordinarily, if we have licenses come available and we make them available to the public, there's multiple applications for those licenses because there's other businesses waiting to start that would very much like them. So, I feel like if a license isn't being used, that, out of all fairness to those who we have required to get open and stay open, that it makes sense that you also should be open and be using that privilege. Lou?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark this on the calendar. I agree with you.
It happens sometimes.
I think that, this license has been abused already. I don't think it's probably hasn't been open for the last 60 to 90 days. And to ask for another 90-day extension, to me is totally unacceptable. I was hoping that they would come here with a plan to open and stay open, but I
And
just
as I
can't
said,
see.
that is possible, if that's what you
I have the
prefer.
floor, please, sir. Thank you. I was hoping they would come here with a plan, and they haven't produced a plan to stay open, or open and stay open. So I don't know at this point if I can grant an extension or not.
I feel like that is my take on it is if there's nothing preventing you from being open, it needs to be open. So, I mean, that's just out of fairness to all the other license holders that are held to the same standard. And I just talked about being consistent with how we make our decisions. Our message to people who hold licenses is use them, because if they're not getting used, there's other people who would very much like to use them and conduct that same business in Wausau. So I guess committee members, do you have either questions for Mr. Milbrandt or comments?
I guess I have one
Go ahead,
question. Is there anything that's preventing you from being open otherwise? Like, I guess.
Yes, we did have some issues in opening. It was through the purchase of the business. So there was a third party involved in it that had our website that would not relinquish it, even though it was in part of, I know that has nothing to do with this committee, but part of the deal where we were supposed to purchase it, and any of the Facebook rights or anything like that came with it. And instead, the person was upset because the person that sold, they lost their job, and so they have the rights to all those because they built those websites and things. And so when you look at Google, it marked as permanently closed, and there's no way to change it. I contacted Google on numerous occasions, and they said ultimately your only course of action is to change the name. They said otherwise, every time you Google it, it's going to say permanently closed. And they made a website that says, in memory of Domino Bar, making it incredibly difficult to do any sort of business at all, because we'd be open, and people would walk in and be like, oh my gosh, you guys are open. I'm like, yeah, we were open. And they're like, oh, it says online you guys are permanently closed. And so we went through this for a number of months. And in talking to the other people, I guess aside from, trying to, go to court about it, which is not really something I prefer to do. I'm much more just handle things, like adults. And ultimately they weren't willing to work with us, so it's stated permanently closed. So it really did hinder our ability to do business and use our liquor license. So, I mean, at this point, I think if it is something that we intend to move forward, we're going to have to do a change in name to be able to, run an established business, because it seemed like there was a lot stacked against us. Because obviously things did change. The $2 beers were no longer, and we had, a little bit nicer place. We remodeled it and made it a little bit nicer place to go. And then there's people that can attest to that. And that wasn't accepted by the old owner's family members that ran the social media and things like that. So that was kind of the reason that kind of led us to, hoping to sell. If it does need to be open, we understand, we're willing to comply with that, comply with any licensing that's necessary, and we can do that moving forward. It just didn't seem to be working in the sense it was just because of that issue that we had run into.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I guess with regard to Google listings and social media, have you made an effort to leverage local advertising? To bring people in separate from what you would find online, I guess?
We even had, so previously, we had sold it since, but we had a food truck that was very popular. And we had used we used our account from our food truck to try to say, hey, you know, this is the new Domino bar, and try to use that. And then they since went, the same person, since went from there to the other one and tried to, they're a web developer, so they're a lot better at the internet than I am. And so they kind of went through there and did the exact same thing with that. And almost, I don't know if you want to use the word canceled, but canceled that as well. So yes, we did try to take corrective action and were unsuccessful. So I think the only thing we could do at this point, like I said, would be to probably do some sort of name change.
Right, and you obviously you have the option to retool. I mean, you remodeled just like you did when you got it. You have the option to, you know, operate under some different trade name or whatever, but I think that an effort needs to be made to open and remain open so that people can see that that license is being used. And, you know, just the idea that it would remain closed and sit, and that really then also sends a message out to every other license holder that if they're interested in selling it and, you know, leveraging their ability to sell it contingent upon the fact that it holds a license, we will see all kinds of abandonment issues because the message cannot get out that people can sit on a license, not use a license, and still have one. And so, I mean, just because we have worked hard to prevent that in the past, we just cannot let it start now. I really feel like you need to get open.
I understand.
To the extent that that's possible. So, anybody else have comments about? Go ahead, Cody.
No, go ahead,
Oh,
Cody.
yeah.
I was gonna ask, so is it your intention to make your renewal paperwork and apply for your license? Because as of right now, we don't have that.
Yep, so what I was told is that there would be, because we were supposed to wait and see how this meeting went, that was kind of the plan. So given where it's at, we would just pay for the new license and the I don't know if it's the fee for the late filing fee, and we could take care of that, that's no issue.
I believe with that, as of right now, is we could issue a provisional license at the next Public Health and Safety Committee, but your license expires on the 30th of
Yes.
this month. So there would be a period of time at the 30th until we issue a provisional that you guys would have to close. If that's
Well, I
my
think the
understanding.
provisional is the gap answer for the gap. So if you have received the provisional paperwork, my understanding was that you could award that provisional that allows them the interim operation until we actually approve the renewal at Public Health and Safety. So the provision should bridge the gap between July 1st and the July meeting, yes.
That was my understanding as well.
So, yep, and so that, I mean, you know, contingent upon receipt of the appropriate paperwork, that's what needs to happen. Luke?
Then I guess the provisional license would also give them a timeline. What kind of timeline do we give them to reopen, to get open? I mean, a week, a month?
Well, they're still under their current license, which gives them the next 2 weeks before the provisional is even needed, so they have until the 30th. And
to reopen.
yes, they could reopen tonight if they had to. I mean, the license they have is still valid.
So if they're not open by the 1st of July, when the provisional license takes place, we can deny that provisional
The renewal.
license at the next meeting?
Correct.
So I guess you have 2 weeks.
Right, that's kind of, yeah, I mean, it needs to get open because that is the other thing. There's consideration to be had about whether or not we want to renew it if we're not seeing positive progress. So I guess let's get that, work with the clerk's office to get that taken care of, you know, to bridge that gap. And then at our next meeting, obviously, if that paperwork's in line, we would have that among the batch for consideration, so.
Thank you for your
All right,
time.
thank you for coming in. Item number 6 is the Tavern Activities Report from May 1st to May 31st. Any questions on the report that you wish to ask the chief about? Looks like it's been a fairly standard month. Chief, anything you want to highlight for us on the report?
Yeah, you may have noticed several months ago the report changed in appearance. I'd like to introduce you to Lieutenant Peter Fish, who's in the back of the room. When he's going to be working, since he's authoring the report, I'm going to have him attend the meeting so you can get it right from the individual that's working on that. And I think you'll notice in this report, there are demerit points assessed to 3 different establishments. And those are establishments within the city that when they were tested, meaning officer supervised under 21 individuals that went in and attempted to purchase alcohol, those establishments sold that alcohol, and then they were cited and assessed those demerit points. And that's an ongoing partnership with the health department. We obviously can't do all the licensed establishments at the same time. So anybody that owns an establishment in the city, fair notice, we're doing
We're coming.
checks.
That's right. That's true. Does anyone have questions of Lieutenant Fish since he has taken time out of his workday to come? And anything, Lieutenant Fish, that you want to talk to the committee about your experience in managing this report so far? Come on up.
I did mention to him that the spreadsheet's a lot easier to look at.
It is.
Yeah,
I
it
will
is.
say, I will commend you. I love the new format of this.
Thanks.
Because it's easy to look at this in terms of sections and find the various data that goes into the development of the report. And, you know, it closes with the demerit schedule, which is a running calendar that we love to keep an eye on. So thank you for cleaning that up and really making that something that's got a lot of information, but it's easy to parse out. So.
Yeah, it's easier for me monthly as well to just go down the list and check things off one by one. Of note, really, the major changes that I'm not putting on the things that aren't relevant, the vehicle lockouts, the traffic stops that happen in the vicinity of the tavern, things like that. So hopefully that's acceptable. That's what you guys are looking for, is the instances of enforcement action that take place at bars and taverns.
Right. I think what we're most interested in terms of that activity log is the stuff that is showing us either a pattern at a place or the more serious things that have taken place there that seem to be relevant to licensing, you know, and that's exactly what you've captured here. You know, and I like that we differentiate, you know, when an establishment calls for assistance, that call came from the business, or if it came from a patron. And, you know, then we can tell if stuff is being bounced outside and unhandled, and that they're calling you after rather than before. That's a little speech that we give all new license holders, is to be proactive and engage your department in a positive way to make sure that they're reporting things before they become larger emergencies. So, any questions at all, anyone? Okay, we love the report. Thank you. Keep them coming. All right. And with that, we have the community outreach update. So every month we've got Tracy Rieger with us. I'll have her just give a quick update on her activities. And I think she has a success story to tell us about today.
Yes, I do. Thank you. You guys will notice that the report is revamped as well on my end. We decided to take the Salvation Army's monthly data out of this report because they are only serving the families now and not any single adults. So our numbers look less overall. As I mentioned in the report, there's total count by everybody I'm getting data from is 188, although we know that is not an accurate true number of unhoused in our community because it still leaves out those that are homeless prior to long-term incarceration. It also leaves out people that are couch surfing. So about 80% of our unhoused sought shelter this last month. And with Catholic Charities being the only shelter now operating and sheltering single adults, they were at about 96% full the month of May, which is really good to know that people are using the shelter system. They had about 71 turnaways last month. As you can see too by the report, we are now keeping track of guest employment. So we have a fair amount of people that are having bed saves on any given night so that they can successfully stay employed. In addition to those numbers, I did house 2 individuals last month, and reached out to about 8 additional individuals besides that to get them resources and what they needed to hopefully start getting out of their current situation. So I don't want to spend a lot of time. If anyone has a question about the report, I'm happy to take those. I know that we have a couple of our officers here tonight too to also give an update on their progress downtown. But I do want to take a moment to recognize my success story from May. Jean is here tonight. She is 58 years old. She had been unhoused for a few months, and you know, I talked about this in previous meetings about the vulnerability of our female population, and Jean was one of those individuals that was, I'll call it, victimized by those trying to take advantage of her, so she had a place to stay and things like that. So this is real. She's doing great. She's in her own apartment. We have her set up with services through the ADRC, which she didn't have prior. She'll be meeting with them this week. I've also set her up with somebody who's interested in being a long-term mentor for her. So somebody that when she gets lonesome or needs somebody to call and talk to, she has that person. So that person and myself will be meeting with Jean this week, and hopefully that will get established as well. So if anyone has any questions for Jean, she is, she said she is willing to take any questions from any of you. If not, I would like to also thank her for her really hard work, because I only provide resources, and the tough work is really on the individual that wants to get out of homelessness and stay out. So
I think we should extend a warm welcome to Jean. Thank you for coming tonight. Her story is inspiring. I think that it's important for us to put a face with the work that Tracy does. And you know, I think sometimes it's easy to lose that component from where we're sitting. And I think it's helpful both to hear the stories of and to hear from people who've experienced what this situation is like in our city. And you know, right now we're working on assembling the committee of the whole that was requested to talk about the current state of things involving our homelessness outreach and the work that's currently in progress, and then kind of measuring the results of that effort before we go to a phase 2, which is what does the path forward look like. So, you know, I guess, and Tracy had told me before the start of this meeting that, you know, obviously none of us expect Jean to give us a presentation, but if anyone has questions for her about her experience or what her experience has been in our community, either prior to or since her interactions, she would be happy to take those from you. If not, I think it's important though still that we have those success stories, and I think it's important that we celebrate the work that's being done every day, because when we measure the human impact of work that we've funded, this is a big one. This really is life-changing for the people that are willing to grab a hold of a hand and accept that help and really get to a better place. And so we are blessed as a community to have Tracy and all of her cohorts that do this work in our community to really get people on a better path and help them find a path that is a positive path forward. So we're very lucky. So Jean, thank you for coming. I do want to give Chief Barnes an opportunity though to introduce us to both of his officers who are conducting the operations downtown, and give them a chance to come up and talk to the committee. Come on up.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We're a friendly bunch, so.
Most of the time, they are a very friendly bunch. I'd like to introduce Nate Porath and Mike Harash. As everyone knows, we established a new team of officers to spend time in our downtown and in our parks and address quality of life issues. We had an incredible amount of officers that expressed interest in serving in that role. We felt it was important to select officers that have the time on the job, that know what they're doing, and have a passion for improving the quality of life downtown. And these are the officers that we selected. They've been in that role. Although we haven't been able to hire to backfill those roles, we assigned both of them to start in that role approximately 3 weeks ago. And so at each public health and safety meeting moving forward, one or the other, or if not both, will be here to answer any questions you might have and share with you what their experience that previous month has been, what issues they're seeing, what successes they might see, and also try and receive feedback from the committee on information you might be looking for to help you make policy decisions or recommendations to the council moving forward. And I understand there's possibly a couple of committee of the wholes that will be moving forward. They are boots on the ground. All of their work does not necessarily involve homeless. It involves behaviors that are occurring in our area. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with our on-house population. And I'll just turn it over to them. I've asked them to speak briefly about the last 3 weeks, what they've been doing, and what type of feedback they're getting.
It's perfect. Tell us how it's been going.
Thank you. My name's Nate Porth. I've been a police officer here in Wausau for 20 years. I grew up in Wausau. So I'm very passionate about this position. It's reinvigorated my interest and desire in law enforcement because I remember what this community was, is, and can be in the future. Before I move forward, though, I just want to recognize Tracy. I know you folks get to hear from her monthly. Until I began working more closely with her, I did not realize the amount of work that Tracy does, and I've expressed this to her. It's an amazing resource for our community to have somebody so passionate like Tracy. So 3-4 weeks ago, Mike and I began the downtown assignment. The first thing we did is we made an effort to get out to as many businesses as we could in the downtown area. For our purposes, we loosely identify the downtown area from 6th Street to 3rd Avenue, from approximately Forest Street or Stewart Avenue up to McIndoe or Elm Street. It's not a strict boundary. Obviously, we respond to calls or needs for our services outside of that area. But we spoke to a lot of businesses. We wanted to identify what their concerns were with the downtown and what sort of quality of life issues they perceived or had, and what we could do to address those issues. So I think that was very beneficial, hearing firsthand from the people who are utilizing the downtown area. In doing so, also, we had a lot of citizen contacts. Chief Barnes was speaking to me earlier today about the number of steps I get in. I've been walking, when I'm working, I'm walking about 5 miles a day. I'm actually getting out of the car, walking the beat, talking to businesses, checking the different areas and seeing what the problem issues are. Some of the concerns that we heard from businesses were regarding loitering, trespassing, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and fighting. And some of those issues, unfortunately, a lot of them stem from the homeless issue downtown. So we've been working a lot with that population and also putting them in touch with Tracy to provide resources for those that desire it. Mike will speak a little bit kind of about what sort of enforcement actions we've been taking downtown to improve the quality of life and the feedback we've been getting from the businesses.
Yeah, hi, Mike Hurrish. I'm in my 8th year with the department. Was excited to get started in this role with Nate, and recognizing that a lot of these issues certainly impact businesses and residents in the downtown area. They also have an impact on our department and utilize a lot of resources for issues that seem to never have resolution. And in walking the downtown area, talking to businesses, talking to residents that live down there, people are very vocal about issues that they see, whether it's a negative run-in with an individual, issues with vandalism, theft, indecency that they don't want their kids or families to be around. So our goal is, like Barnes said, targeted at behaviors, not any certain population. Quite frankly, there are behaviors that have a pretty negative impact downtown. We've had businesses articulate and contact us directly saying that their customers are filing complaints or being vocal about negative issues, and the last thing we want to see is businesses have customers turned away because of behaviors that could be addressed. which is a very, very obvious way to increase the quality of life. We want our downtown area to be thriving, we want businesses to move into that area, and we want consumers to want to be in the downtown area. A lot of the tasks that we do in this new role are not new to this role. They're things that we were dealing with on patrol, but we have the dedicated time to focus our efforts to not just find the quickest way to get onto the next issue because it's a busy day on patrol, but see things through and take enforcement action where it's necessary. Just in these first couple of weeks, we've had repeated and constant issues with public intoxication, public indecency and other manners, vandalism, criminal damage to property, thefts, physical assaults. So these issues are occurring regularly in our downtown area and in our city parks, and the ability to address some of those is tremendous. Just in a couple of weeks, some of the enforcement action we've taken, on the patrol side of things, we've started to see a shift in the behavior in some of these populations that are behaving this way, which is great for us to see, but somebody from a different perspective who doesn't understand our day-to-day, it's easy for people to maybe be skeptical or say, hey, are we really doing anything? But a simple walk downtown, Nate and I have people come up to us every day saying that, I mean, whether it's just our presence or actually seeing a difference, people are voicing that they're seeing more people come in for business, they're seeing less issues downtown. Some of the behaviors that we're seeing change, whether it's public intoxication or people doing things they're not supposed to, because we've been taking enforcement action, we've been seeing some things start to change as far as seeing less of certain behaviors in certain areas, which is just great to see. So as far as like hard data, we don't have any numbers to present. We're still working on piecing together data systems that can kind of give us some quantitative things to present to you guys, but word of mouth feedback and things that Nate and I are seeing, we're off to a good start. And we even have had some success stories with the diversion program at the district attorney's office, and getting people in contact with Tracy to try to get in touch with resources. Where the ball is starting to roll slowly, and we're going to hope to see it continue to speed up here as we go. So.
Perfect. That's exactly, I think, what we were hoping to hear when we approved the start of this program as an experiment to see if it can move the needle. And, you know, while we had a lot of debate through that approval process about the difference between criminalizing homelessness and criminalizing criminal behavior, I think it's important that people recognize there's a distinct difference there. I also am glad to see that we have experienced officers assigned to the task. I think that people who are familiar with all of the tasks associated with this effort makes that effort much easier and more credible. I think that we have to balance not only addressing nuisance and criminal behaviors, but we also have to balance that with connecting people to services and care where that's possible. And I think that's the exact job that you're doing, which is inspiring for us to see. What we want is a thriving and safe business district. But I love the fact that you're able to take the time on those calls to take a more well-rounded and holistic approach to not only addressing the what happened, but figuring out what maybe the preventative step for next time is, or the why it happened in the first place, you know, to try to get people onto that better path. And I think the measurement for that success is going to be that we're going to sense that increased perception of safety in the area where it was maybe lacking before in terms of public and you know, just downtown patron feedback. But then we may also see an increase in people's willingness to accept help and outreach. So as you're making those connections, and maybe people recognizing that certain behaviors that went unchecked before won't anymore, if that incentivizes, you know, a person or two to accept that hand up finally, we may see a reduction in some of the exact things that have been negatively impacting us as a community. So I cannot think of a better way for you guys to start, and so proud of your effort and the fact that you've been able to engage in such a short time with the community to even already start to see some positive changes. So committee members, any questions or comments? No one has any? It means you guys covered it all. So, but I am excited to see your work, and you know, every month when we have this meeting, whoever's available, join us. We want to hear about what you're seeing out there, anecdotally, how things are going. If you have things that you feel are roadblocks to the effort, that are policy decisions that we need to make. If you find, that was the first thing we asked Tracy when we brought her on, is we get the work that you're trying to do. If there are things that you identify that present daily struggles for your work, and it's some policy matter that we can solve, tell us. If it's not, we can't, but if it's something that we can solve, we certainly want to try, so.
I think one thing that would be a question for this committee representing the council is the collection of data and information is time consuming and more complicated than I could have appreciated it being. We are finalizing with IT an app for our officers to use. The information in it is only going to be as good as asking questions and having people share it with us, but questions such as length of time that they've been unhoused, ties to Wausau, different things having to do with their current situation. We've also received offers of partnership from organizations such as River District or the Chamber that have offered to poll or survey their membership. We're more than happy to participate in that if there's a piece of information that you'd like us to include as we collect that data, or if you think that type of surveying of downtown businesses would be useful for policymaking. We'd like some guidance on that because of the amount of work it takes to do that. I don't want us to be investing time in things that you don't think have value for your decision making, or if there is some piece of information you'd like us to collect, we'll be able to provide that to you. Hard pieces of data that you'll get are actions are tracked. So if you wanted how many people have been arrested, how many people have been cited, encampments that we're dealing with, where are we finding encampments, that's information we can be prepared to share with you moving forward over the next several months. It's that other unquantifiable information or people's feelings about downtown or the ability to do business there that I think we'd like some guidance or feedback, whether it be tonight or at a future meeting.
I think that we should expect to be asked about contact and arrest data and about citation data. Only because there was a measure of skepticism within the council when we first had this discussion about what our intentions were and what outcomes we were seeking. So I think it helps to have those figures, and to be able to recognize, are the vast majority of your contacts things other than that? Are they all, how many are arrests? How many are citations? People were concerned about citing people who are fine immune, basically, that the effect of a money fine is useless on people who have no means to pay or a willingness to pay. And so I think, and then there were other people who had concerns about pressure on the jail population by, arresting too many folks for things that they felt were the less serious offenses compared to the things that normally dwell in our jails. So, I think that we'll absolutely be asked about that, and I think we should be prepared to offer that data. But I also think that, and I do believe that your time or their time is best spent on the street doing the work. So don't spend an inordinately large amount of time data gathering, because that then takes away from the whole point of the mission, which is a laser focus on a better and more defined response to these things when they're happening. I think in this committee, anecdotally, it helps us to know, in terms of trend analysis, are you seeing an uptick or a downtick in certain things? And they aren't all necessarily measurable indicators, but are you encountering a larger number of people in a particular circumstance? Are you seeing an increase in things that people report? We've talked about the victimization of women in this situation. We know that that's already at a high. Are we seeing improvement in the volume of people who are accepting or willing to accept help and willing to start to network with Tracy, who perhaps 3 months ago were not interested in that effort? I think that type of, if we see things trending up or down, that's an indicator for us as a committee.
I think one thing that wasn't defined for you, and I would have no expectation that anyone here would know what you were talking about. Officer Raish mentioned, there are individuals they've arrested, and you worked with the DA's office, and the name of the program is just left my head.
Diversion and deflection.
Diversion and
Diversion and deflection. And so That is a process in which resources that the district attorney has, whether they be rehabilitation resources, that they can financially support for those individuals, by working with them is a pathway to get resources and to get affordable resources. So it had dawned on me while sitting here, one, we can say we do those things, but understanding what it is, and potentially for a cow, or if you think there'd be value for this committee to bring the diversion deflection coordinator here to present to this committee and say, just because the officers are arresting someone, it's not like Monopoly, do not pass go, do not collect 200, go straight to jail. That starts them down a path with the same goals that everyone's trying to get them to use resources. So it's not necessarily just criminalization, because the goal of those programs is to be utilized to get resources to avoid that prosecution. So if you think there's value in that.
I think there's value in that on two fronts. First, I think there's a misconception about the county's involvement, and that is one way that the county and the court system are involved. I think that there is a perception sometimes that the county is either doing nothing or not doing enough, and I don't think we have really gathered enough information about what ways they contribute to this in a positive way that are not just giving us all money or diverting, NCHC staff or whatever it might be. So, is there a number of ways they can help? Probably, but I think as we start to have these discussions, and the mayor's had some discussions also with the county administrator about just ideas, things like, the possibility of a task force, perhaps the opportunities that they have identified on the county side that really could help us regionally. So, I think it's important for us to have that information. And I think that having that diversion program available so people understand that an arrest does not always mean an increase in the jail population or putting people on a desperate path to getting no help. I think there's a misconception about what that means too. So, if that's playing a big part in the success that you're having on the street, I think it's important for people to understand that. I think people who've never experienced it and are only seeing it from the outside, sometimes we're limited to only what we know from TV. We don't understand that all arrests aren't the same, all outcomes aren't the same, all court system engagement isn't all the same. So I think it would be helpful, to have that information. Anything else from anybody that that you would like to see or hear about as they go? And that can maybe take shape once we know a little more too. After we have a couple of meetings under our belt, if you think of something on the fly, that you want to ask them about that they may know right off the bat, or between meetings can find out for you. Go ahead, Carol.
Just, I agree about the diversion program. I'd be very interested in learning about that. And if there's any other programs or processes, not that, but anything else like that maybe a pathway for people that, I don't know if there is, but anyway.
I think that report's definitely helpful for the committee of the whole, but I think it's information that as things roll along, that we would like to touch on, at least anecdotally in this committee as well, because we're monitoring it on a monthly basis. So we're getting a more timely view of really how the situation is evolving or not in this committee than what we would have in the context of a committee of the whole, which is a point in time communication to the council that they've asked for. So I think, and we kind of wanted to wait to schedule that until we had some measurable results from this process. Let our two officers get out there and actually partake in the work for a bit so that they can even report on what's even happening. If that had not started yet, we'd have nothing to tell anyone. So I really think we're on the right path though. So anybody else have questions or comments? If you think of things also that you want us to decide as a committee, like whether or not we want to hear about it or not, in between meetings or whatever, obviously just network with us and we can offer that insight as well, but I really think that we're heading in a positive direction.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
But thank you for coming in, and thank you for doing that work. It's very important work. With that, we are out of agenda. Oh, go ahead, Carol, sure.
Just before, it's Jean
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
So, not to put you on the spot, and this is rather open-ended, so you don't, if there's nothing you can think of, that's fine. But one, I'm happy that you're back with your kitty. But two, I said one, I'm happy that you're back with your kitty.
Oh, yeah,
I'm an
very
animal
happy
lover,
to be
so.
back with my kitty, thank
Yeah,
you.
but
He
two.
takes walks with me daily.
Nice, nice. Two, is there anything else that you would like us to know about, we're going to be discussing this more, just from your experience as far as homelessness, is there
Okay, my
anything?
experience of homelessness was very sudden. Okay, I got in a fight with my daughter. Her husband is doing things that I didn't agree with. So then I was homeless in 2023 from January to June, as you guys said on the paper that she wrote up. But what I did notice is the shelters. Okay, when I was thrown into that shelter, which is the Catholic Charity Shelter, I wouldn't recommend that place to my dead dog. I'm so sorry. Only reason being is the predators also go there. So when you throw somebody that, like me, who had a home, into a shelter where they have no idea about the dangers of people being out there, that have been out there for years and years and know the ropes and know how to get around the laws and get away with things, it's very hard to then go back into home and adjust. I'm having a very hard time adjusting to my home now because of the threats that were made to me at the shelter. You as a police chief know how many times your officers have been called over there. That's a problem.
I think that's
Sorry,
important.
that is a very big problem. And most of the people that are homeless have been out there for years. And that's sad.
Thank you for that insight, because I think that's something too that we need to take stock of is what is the climate. One thing that I think there would be value in this committee on a monthly basis, just like we get the update from Tracy and from our officers, I do believe there would be value for us to have a representative in here every month from Catholic Charities to talk to us about the operation of the day center and the night shelter, so we can figure out what's happening there. If it's stuff like that, and those environments are not safe.
I'm not saying that the day center is a bad thing.
Right.
Because I've had all good experience during the day center. But
Okay.
it's the night center that I'm afraid, because all of them come together and everybody knows everybody, which is a homeless community, okay? We
Sure.
look out for each other, we help each other. Like when I first became homeless, I went out there with 2 bags of tobacco and I was handing them out, man. Here, 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 here. And then I realized that there was nobody gonna help me.
I think that's important. Because we're funding them both, we fund the night center and the day center, I think it's important for us to understand what that
It's scary
what that
there.
looks like. Yes, and I
Many
think
a
that's
nights there was one night in particular that one guy had approached me for drugs. I am drug free. I do not smoke. I do not drink. I did at one time be, truthful. However, he approached me, and then when I said no, he then began bringing people over that were threatening me.
yeah. That's,
And I had to sleep in the dining area because I was so scared.
I mean, we want those facilities to be safe also, and so I think monthly, if it would help us to get at least an update from the providers as to, because those facilities have to be made safe as well. And, you know, we did hear during the first go-round with the night center and the day center, we had heard from the operators of that facility talking about the fact that they were having some struggles with people's visitors.
The alcohol, the drugs that are coming into the facility?
That was it. It was people that were coming into the facility to prey upon people who really wanted help. Right.
You've had your dogs out there. The police have had the dogs out there. They've sniffed out the products and the stuff that's laying outside that people know they can't bring in.
Yep.
So they leave it outside.
Yeah. And I think that's important information. I think to know, at least to hear firsthand what that experience has been.
There. I was scared staying there.
Yeah. I am
Coming
so
from
glad
home.
to hear that you've been able to move to a better place than that environment.
But I still have the threat over my head that, you know, because I called the police on a gentleman and he got his friends all rallied, the homeless, because I've only been out there, 3 months on a reality. He got all his friends involved and now they're like over there in the place where I live. There's, you know, I walk down the street, I see them. I'm scared to go out. I haven't been out but twice in the 2 months I've been there.
Right.
And you throw these people into, you know, anybody that becomes homeless needs an outreach.
Right.
They really do.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but Catholic Charities is definitely not it.
Well, and that's what we, you know, I think that's one of the things that it's helpful for us to have that information. You know, I think that
I mean,
there's,
granted, it's a shelter,
right,
but there needs to be enforcement in that shelter.
Oh, for sure. And we've actually worked with them also. They were, when we started down that effort, it was recognized that there was work needed to keep that place safe because what we were seeing at that point were two different populations. One that was there to legitimately get to a better path, and another one that was there perhaps to prey upon those folks. And so that was creating a dynamic in there where, you know,
it's
it was
still going on. It hasn't changed.
Right, and it wasn't that long ago when we heard that. And so, you know, I think that, you know, our interaction with them and their interaction with the PD as far as what can be done to make sure that that facility operates properly and is safe, that is work going forward. I think that we need to keep an eye on. There's a lot of things.
Having Tracy on this end is a real blessing. Thank you for her.
She is amazing, and thank you for giving her the opportunity to help you. And I really think that she really can change lives when she's given that opportunity. And I love that that you are a success story for her. And I mean, just to read your story and to see the picture that was put up, that you are back in your own, in a home, that inspires us. That inspires us to keep doing this kind of work too.
That was really great to get in.
Well, and it takes a serious measure of courage for you to come and be willing to talk to us today in a forum like this. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, we are out of agenda items. Unless anyone has questions about the outreach report, we'll place that on file. And then we'll continue this effort with the same reports next month. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Larson, second from Watson. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. We'll stand adjourned then. Thanks, everyone.